Hello, my fellow aviators. Welcome back to the channel. I've not done an interview here in a good amount of time. One of the ones that I did last year was with Mike and Sean from the Pro Pilot Playbook. So say wave hello, guys. We did this about a year ago, and it was a really successful interview. It got a lot of views. A lot of people had a lot of great questions, and everyone really seemed to enjoy it. So I thought, now that a year had passed, it'd be time to do it again because things are always changing in aviation. So, Sean and Mike, thank you very much. So, here's what we're going to talk about today, guys. We're going to talk about, for you aspiring corporate pilots, or maybe you don't even know you're an aspiring corporate pilot, you're just an aspiring professional pilot. Both Mike and Sean have been corporate pilots for a long time. They know way more about it than I ever will. So I'll just do my very best to ask some smart questions and then sit back and shut up and let them give some very good answers for y'all. So let's begin with simple question. Um, why consider being a corporate pilot versus the much more traditional airline pilot path? And either one of you guys can take that one.
Well, I guess I'll start. I got a lot to say on this topic, but I'll try not to go too far overboard. But yeah, so first of all, Sean and I came up at a different time. Right after 9/11, we were getting our ratings, and the market conditions couldn't be more different than they were now. I mean, you had this distant dream of becoming an airline pilot, but the people that follow your channel now, they can get there very, very quickly. That wasn't the case when we started flying, and a lot of guys just wanted to get any kind of flying job. So the market conditions were different, and then once you get very advanced in your corporate career, like we are, it's very hard to transition over because you kind of get used to the lifestyle. But the big point that I would bring up, and airline airline jobs are very cut and dry. You have a flying line. You could be at different airlines, but they're all pretty much the same. It's based on seniority, and the schedule is based on how long you're there and how quickly you upgrade. The pay's all drawn out. Corporate's totally different. It just depends on your job. But generally speaking, one thing I can say that really applies to almost all corporate jobs versus airline jobs is the volume of flying that you do is dramatically, dramatically different than the volume of flying you do as an airline pilot. Sean can give a lot more insight on this because he was actually an airline pilot for a period of time, and now he is a corporate pilot. So yeah, what do you say, Sean?
Yeah, well, Trent, we get this style of question often because Mike and I have really been typecast as corporate guys, because it's a lot of what we talk about because it is our day to day. But yeah, I've flown for two different airlines. Mike was at an airline for a short amount of time. But for me, the reason why I transitioned out of the airlines at the time, this isn't so much so today, but yeah, in the long run, you make less money as a corporate pilot, but you also fly a ton less. But in the beginning, in the very beginning, the potential for higher earnings at the very beginning of your career as an airline pilot versus corporate pilot, you're going to have more earnings as a corporate pilot, typically.
So what I'm hearing is that you're going to fly typically less than an airline pilot. You're going to go to cooler places. You're going to fly more modern, cooler jets. You might end up with some really terrific vacations that you don't have to pay for. And you might end up making more money early on in your career. So all of that, of course, sounds pretty darn awesome. Like,
Right. So where are the cons? What's the bad part, right?
gotta be some downsides. I can think of one in that the first one that comes to mind for me is job security. So let's put that one at
Mhm.
the end of the list of cons because I think it's the obvious one. But what are
Mhm.
some of the other cons that you might experience? And then we can talk about this job security one.
I guess we hear a lot the hurry up and wait. That's a big one. Some companies, if you do a lot of business trips, you're sitting in FBOs. They do say you work for a retail company. A lot of times they'll look at stores, and you'll fly to one town, then you'll sit at the FBO for 3 or 4 hours while they're in a meeting. Then they'll fly them to another town. You'll sit there 3 or 4 hours. So the hurry up and wait thing that can be a negative. The schedule, although you don't fly much, sometimes you don't have a lot of control over when you fly like you do on an airline. So Sean can speak of
I
the
can
airline
well,
schedule.
I can
Yeah.
sum up what you're trying to say. I've had this analogy, or it's not an analogy, it's a
Right.
little quip I've been using for years. Trent, here's the difference. At the airlines, the mission at the airlines is maintaining a schedule.
Mhm.
And what Mike and I do, our schedule revolves around maintaining the mission of whatever the guy in the back is wanting to do.
Well put.
Yeah.
Well put.
So, aside from what I alluded to with the job security issue, which we'll talk about now, before we talk about that, is there any other significant cons that you see, or is job security
Sure.
the elephant in the room?
Sure. One of the other ones that, it always weighs on my mind, especially as, I'm getting older. I'm 48 now, and what I think about is, and I got enough other stuff going on in my life. I'm just fine. But I think about, the guys at Delta that are my age or, 10 years from now, I could be sitting at Delta. The big payday is what I'm talking about here. You're not going to be pulling down the $500,000 a year, playing games with the schedule, only working 3 days a month.
Right.
That stuff most likely will never exist in the corporate world.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's definitely some cons to offset the pros that we talked about earlier in our conversation. The biggest of which is job security. But then that begs the question, which is kind of my second waypoint on our flight plan of this interview, is that corporate pilot is pretty vague. There's a lot of different ways. You can be part 91 flying for Mr. or Mrs. Rich person. You can be part 135. You can be working for a Fortune 500 company that has a flight department. You could be at NetJets. And the issues that we're talking about are going to be different. Like if you're at NetJets or you're at the Fortune 500 flight department and you piss off some VP's wife, maybe it's not going to be the end of your job. Whereas if it's a rich guy and you piss off his wife, then maybe that's not going to be so good. So what kind of color do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I personally, I mean, I'm sure Mike would agree with me here. I almost am of the opinion that the 135 guys, they're not doing the same thing, Mike and I. First of all, it's not the same job. But what I was going to say is I'm of the opinion that I almost in my head don't label them corporate aviation. Yeah, it's corporate aviation, but those aren't the corporate pilots I'm thinking. When I think corporate pilot, I'm thinking the guy flying for Kroger, Procter and Gamble, Coca-Cola,
Right.
Walmart. That's a corporate pilot.
But what's
135 operator, that's like the stepping stone to
Mhm.
get to become the corporate pilot. I mean, that's a
Very
different
well
ball
put.
game.
And that's important to talk about, Trent. I think we'll take some time talking there because that's what your viewers are gonna, people that watch your channel in our channel, they want to move into their first flying job and get paid. It's probably going to be a 135 corporate job if it's not a regional airline.
Do you think it matters for because I have a lot of folks here on the channel who are we'll say halftime of the game, like we are. We're
Mhm.
halfway through the game, so to speak, a little older. Do you think
Yeah.
it matters if you're a career 2.0 pilot? Would you guys steer them towards airline versus corporate for any particular reason, or corporate versus airline? In other words,
Uh,
does age have anything to do with this?
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, there's, of course, anybody that is, into this at all knows that there's the mandatory retirement
Yeah.
from an airline world. That doesn't exist in the corporate world, no matter what, sliver of the corporate world you're in. There is in no mandatory retirement. I personally don't see any issue, especially now with regional guys being thrown bonuses and you're starting off at real money. I mean, I don't see any reason not to go to the airlines first. Even if you get in there, you only spend 3 or 4 years there and realize that there is some corporate opportunity for you. The airlines are the low hanging fruit for somebody just coming into this thing, wanting to be professional. The money's there now, and the biggest thing is you're getting professional training.
Mhm.
Mike and I see all the time in our industry the guys who skipped doing any kind of 135 operation or skipped a 121 operation, which is the airlines. Anybody that's watching this, 135 is the private on-demand charter, 121 is airlines. But these guys that didn't do any of that professional style flying, they are missing certain critical baseline skills of CRM stuff. When we're in the cockpit flying in a 2 pilot crew, it's almost like a script we work off of. I say something, the other guy says a response. He says something, I have a response for that. We're doing pre-flights. There's a dance we do across the cockpit with a script coming out of our mouths, and it sounds silly and robot like, but it actually makes your day to day a lot easier, especially when things start going sideways on you. So those guys though that only did 91, they're missing that, and you'll get that in the airlines. You'll get it in the most hardcore manner there is.
Mhm.
And when you come over to this corporate world, you're even more respected and seasoned and experienced in general.
Y- Go ahead.
And that was a big part of the reason why I decided to go the airline path first. I thought, well, one scenario is I'm just going to stay here and build the seniority and
Sure.
a cushy
Right.
schedule, and life will be fine. But on the other hand, if I ever did want to make the change or even supplement it by doing contract work, I can point back to this incredible training that I received and all the twin turbine time that I have now. And that's going to really amplify my resume.
As much movement as there is in everything, I mean, I would be confident in telling somebody that was even, past 50, maybe even up to 55. I mean, that if you got a fire lit under your butt, you could probably make it to the majors. I mean, you may not make it to the end of that. The most majors pay scales are based on 12 years because
Yeah.
most people forget it used to be everybody was 40 years old before they made it to the majors. Now, some of them are extending it out. Some of them are up like 15-year pay scales now, but you could most likely still make it to the majors before mandatory retirement. And I've been saying for several years now, their next move to combat the pilot shortage will be to raise the mandatory retirement. It was already on the floor of Congress before the election.
Yeah.
I think it's got swept to the side for a little bit here, but that's going to be back up in everybody's faces again, especially because now we're probably looking at the other end of it being tightened up. And it's possible that, if you're watching this, I don't know, the internet's forever. Just recently, we had the incident up in your home country,
Toronto.
Oh yeah.
Toronto. We had the airplane rolling down the runway there. Everybody, it was a miracle. Everybody got out of there unscathed, alive. But that could be looked at if that thing goes the way the rumor mill's going. That could end up raising some minimums for pilots to get on with the airlines.
Yeah,
Just
and I
like,
think our
just like
theory
what
on that,
yeah,
yeah, that'll take a little while to shake out. So that's
sure,
actually good for your viewers and really good for you, Trent, because you'll be in the midst of this. And if they raise the minimums, they raise the minimums. You're already in.
right.
So um, I think what I would say to this, though, in a nutshell, Trent, is this. This used to crack me up, 10, 15 years ago. These guys, you talk to a guy flying at Delta or a guy flying at United, and he'd say, well, I chose Delta because, it has the best opportunity for earnings and all this. Or the guy will say, I chose United because it had the all fleet of all the new. And it's like, no, you didn't, dude.
No, you
You
didn't.
chose those because they were the ones that were hiring and you had the time at that time and you got an interview there and they hired you and you took the job.
So what I'm
Yep.
hearing is that for someone in the current environment, it seems like the better path would probably be to go to the airlines first, get that high quality training, get those turbine twin or multi-turbine hours. And then once you've been doing that for a year, two, three, something like that, then maybe think about, well, what doors now are open to me that might not have been open to me if I didn't go the Part 121 path to begin with. So, with that said, I know this interview is getting along. What we're going to do is we're going to divide this interview into two separate videos for you. So when you come
Okay.
back and watch the second part of the interview, what we're going to talk about is what to do when you're a little lower time, certification requirements, how to find employers, how networking applies, and they're going to get these guys best networking secret and any other things they'd like to add. So thank you very much for watching the first half of the interview. We look forward to seeing you back in the second half of the interview.
Great. Thanks a
Great.
lot, Trent.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having us. This has been great.
Excellent time. Yeah, we'll see you next week.